The 2020 election, unrest in the streets, and a crippling pandemic. This trifecta of events made people worried about the future of America. And when people are worried in America, they buy guns. Gun sales in 2020 have surged, and the market for gun parts and ammunition has gone up with it. And aftermarket gun parts can range from a few dollars to a few $1,000s, like EOTech holographic optics or gun sights, which can go for more than $700, or Magpul pop-up gun sights that can go for around $60. Smith & Wesson stock soared 135% for the year by mid-October 2020. And federal background checks have passed 32 million for the year, an all-time high, with more than a month and a half to go in 2020. When gun sales go up, ammunition can also become harder to find. What is causing this surge in gun sales?
You had a lot of people on the right basically worried about either a breakdown of government and anarchy, but also at the same time worried about heavy-handed government. So you kind of had people stocking up on guns for almost opposite reasons.
10% more women own guns now than in 2005, according to the National Rifle Association. And according to the National African American Gun Association, 15,000 new members have joined the group in 2020 alone.
You always have sort of your usual suspects, your middle-aged, typical, what people consider like the stereotypical gun owner. But you're also seeing very large increases in percentages that are either minorities or women. In fact, I've seen some looks at this that have seen that it's actually minority women who are the greatest increases in the demographic of new gun owners.
Will the surge in gun sales go down as a Joe Biden administration takes over in 2021?
A huge number of the things that Joe Biden intends to proceed on require executive action, and that is uniquely within his purview.
Or will sales take off over fears of new gun control laws? The Second Amendment enshrines the right to own firearms in the United States. Through numerous legal battles, legislation, and normalization, it has stood the test of time. A patchwork of gun laws in the US stem from each state having different restrictions on certain types of guns and accessories. In some states like Florida, you can have giant magazines, and even automatic weapons if you apply and pay for a federal tax stamp. In other states like California, there are tough restrictions on buying guns.
Florida, if you feel in threat for your life, you can, sometimes depending on the background check, you might have to wait 3 days, but typically you can walk out of the store with that firearm that day after having passed a background check. In California, you have to go in, you have to pass the background check, you have to purchase that weapon, and then you have to go home, wait 10 days, and then make your way back to that gun store 10 days later.
In the days before the 2020 election, Joe Biden tweeted that he would support a new assault weapons ban.
Ultimately, what Joe Biden is saying around an assault weapons ban is, number one, he helped enact one when he was a U.S. Senator with Jem and Sarah Brady. Brady made that happen. Number two, it made a difference. Even at that time, it made a big difference because the use of those kinds of weapons over the 10 years after that ban was enacted went way down. And let's be clear, these are military-grade weapons designed to kill as many people as efficiently as possible. Talk to parents who've lost their kids in school shootings and ask them whether they think an assault weapons ban is worth it. Number three, it will have more of an effect on prospective gun use.
Along with gun owners, gun manufacturers and sellers are now preparing for a Biden presidency, which could change how their industry operates.
They're talking about preparing to defend their Second Amendment rights. And the assault weapons ban, that's a huge boogeyman for gun rights advocates.
There are some things I anticipate a Biden administration would do fairly quickly, as he has promised to do fairly quickly, namely looking at some ATF regulations and understandings of receivers and uppers and lowers and sort of complicated technical aspects of what defines or doesn't define a firearm. But for the most part, I think what you're looking at in terms of the broader scope of a Biden administration policy would have to be something that gets through Congress, whether it's an assault weapons ban or raising purchasing ages or anything like that. That's going to have to come through Congress. And then ultimately, given a newly reconstituted Supreme Court, you're going to see Supreme Court challenges.
I think you have to be realistic about it when we're talking about a so-called assault weapons ban, because If the Democrats don't win the Senate, then I think we're just not even going to be talking about that for until the next election anyway. But also, even if they do win the Senate, even if the Democrats are in control, that's going to be something that's heavily negotiated. And what you're likely to see is that there's going to be all kinds of loopholes and grandfathering. And if you grandfather in AR-15s that have already been bought, you're talking about millions of semi-automatic rifles that aren't going to go away.
The US has 120.5 guns per 100 residents, which is more than any other country in the world, with the next highest being Yemen. Although mass shootings in the US are common compared to the rest of the world, there has been little appetite for stricter gun laws on a national level. The federal assault weapons ban was in place from 1994 to 2004 and expired during the George W. Bush presidency. It mostly affected aesthetic parts of weapons. Banning new weapons also means that older ones are grandfathered in and legal after new laws are passed. Some gun buyers purchase heavily when it appears that new laws could restrict in-demand firearms. FBI background checks, which are used as a way to gauge gun sales, showed that gun sales were already up by 1.7 million in 2019 from the previous year, possibly due to the Democratic wave in 2018 that took over the House.
The prices have gone way up, and you see gun prices fluctuate, I would say, more than most industries.
The coronavirus pandemic and unrest over racial injustice in 2020 added fuel to the fire, and soon even those who were previously not lured by gun culture were buying them, just in case things in the US got worse. Gun sales traditionally go up when Democrats win elections, and they go down when Republicans win.
Because of that, you have these kind of crazy surges of demand, and then you also have these troughs. And the troughs happen sort of ironically when more gun-friendly administrations come in. So when Trump was elected, there was a whole phenomenon called the Trump slump in the gun industry. So even though he was, arguably the most gun-friendly president in generations, his election actually kind of hurt the gun industry. And now we're seeing that clearly come back in a big way.
In 2008, FBI background checks, a metric to gauge gun sales, came in around 12.7 million for the year, up from 11.1 million the previous year. And in 2016, they were up by around 4.4 million from 2015, possibly in part because the polls predicted a win by Hillary Clinton. When Donald Trump ended up winning, background checks dropped by 2.3 million from the previous year in 2017. These spikes can also affect stock prices for gun and ammunition producers. For example, Ruger saw an increase in its stock price after the 2012 election, rising from $28.63 per share in November 2011 to $47.68 per share after the election in 2012, peaking in the $50 range just before the election. Ruger shares also rose to $90 per share in August during the height of the unrest in the country, and have dropped since then to the $65 range after the election, which is still a solid increase from November 2011. Sometimes shares in companies that specialize in firearms can dip due to other events like mass shootings, new state laws, or the potential for new federal regulations. After a whirlwind 2020, future growth for gun and gun accessories remains uncertain. In early November, Pfizer announced its vaccine candidate was 90% effective against COVID-19. It was a huge boost for the stock market, and for optimism over the ongoing battle against coronavirus. The stock prices of Smith & Wesson and Ruger, two major gun manufacturers, however, dropped by 9% on the same headlines. The peaceful election week also may have been a factor in the drop in stock price. As the Biden administration takes over, there could be a spike in gun sales. Fears of new bans and also a crackdown on anti-government armed groups could drive ammunition shortages, new gun sales, and the reseller market.
We've never, ever had a president of the United States and a vice president of the United States who embrace gun violence prevention and public health solutions to gun violence in the manner that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do, and we look forward to embracing solutions all of America wants, and it's not going to involve the confiscation or the removal of a single gun from any household in America. I guarantee that.
I think really the biggest pushback you're going to get are from the millions of new gun owners, many of whom for the first time went through the process of trying to purchase a gun and ran headlong into those barriers that have been put in place, especially in places like California, where you had a lot of first-time gun owners who thought, yeah, I can just walk in today and come out with an AR-15, and are finding that's simply not the case. They're going, what do you mean I have to wait 10 days? What do you mean I have to pass a background check to get ammunition now?
When we talk about gun control in America, and when we talk about these things, we have to talk about it in the context of roughly 400 million guns already in the US, and almost certainly not going anywhere, because it's just politically impossible, even with Democrats controlling all three branches.